Good morning, everyone. Hello, my name is Danae Hines. I'm the Director of Sustainability for OBM International, and I'm also the Director of CHTA's Caribbean Alliance for Sustainable Tourism. I would like to thank you all for joining us this afternoon or morning. On behalf of CHTA, CTO, and CARPHA, I would like to welcome you all to our second Zika webinar, Taking a Bite Out of Zika, Practicing Effective Mosquito Control. Now, before we begin today's webinar, let's go over a few housekeeping items. This presentation is, in fact, being recorded, so you will be able to access the video as well as the PowerPoint presentation about 48 hours after the webinar is over on our website, www.caribbeanhotelandtourism.com. Just click on the Zika Resource Center link, which you will find on the homepage. After the presentation, there will be a question and answer session. You can feel free to submit your questions by typing them into the webinar's chat room. Any additional questions that we do not have time to get to will be answered by the speakers after the webinar. So we have a lot to get through today, so we're very excited. Again, we have our first presenter. We will start with Dr. Karen Holson-Edwards. She is with CARPHA, and she will go through Zika, the facts. And then she will also be followed by some of our looking aheads and looking at some of the situations of Zika, eliminating breeding grounds. We'll go through best practices with some of our experts as well as some hoteliers who are on the line on our call with us. And we will finish up, obviously, with our CHTA representatives and a note from our president. So without further ado, we'll get right into it. Dr. Karen, thank you so much if you are with us. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much. My apologies for being late. So I'm just going to speak a little about CARPHA and give some more information about Zika and how it's transmitted, what we know, what we don't know, some of the symptoms and treatment, and looking at what CARPHA is doing in their role in helping the region to deal with this epidemic that is upon us. In terms of CARPHA, now CARPHA was formed in 2013, coming out of a mandate that was given by CARICOM in 2002 for the review of the 5 regional health institutions. And so it's an amalgamation of the Caribbean Research Council, the Caribbean Food and Nutrition Institute, the Caribbean Environmental Health Institute, the Caribbean Regional Drug Testing Laboratory, and what was then known as the Caribbean Epidemiology Center. And this slide just shows the countries covered by CARPHA. So we have 24 countries that we serve, some CARICOM, some Dutch territories, and some associate members, which are the British Overseas Territories. And CARPHA's mandate basically is based on our vision and that of a Caribbean in which the health of the people is promoted and protected from disease, injury, and disability, thereby fostering the wellness solution that was enunciated in what we call the Port of Spain Declaration. So that's just a bit about CARPHA. So moving to the next slide, please. Okay, thank you. So the next slide zones us into Zika, which is what is on everyone's tongue nowadays. Now, Zika was first known in the Americas or entered the Americas in 2014 through an outbreak that was detected in Easter Island in Chile. And in May 2015, local transmission was reported in Brazil, and since then the virus has spread to several countries and territories in the Caribbean and the Americas at large. And as you're seeing from this map, dated the 1st of February 2016, it lists some of the CARPHA member states and surrounding territories where local transmission of Zika is taking place. Now, there may be some areas where Zika has been imported or imported cases have been reported, but there isn't local transmission established. Now, what exactly is Zika? Zika, as most people now know, is a virus that was detected first in the 1940s in the Zika forest in Uganda. It was found in monkeys, and then in 1952 it made the jump to humans, and then outbreaks started then, but minor outbreaks. So it was seen as an obscure virus at the time until 2007 when major outbreaks started to occur in parts of Africa and Southeast Asia, and then in 2013 in Polynesia, and then now we're seeing in the Americas. Now, Zika is known to be generally a mild disease with symptoms such as fever, headache. You can move to the next slide, please. Mild symptoms such as fever, headache, a rash which begins on the face and moves to the chest and other parts of the body. Persons may have conjunctivitis, a feeling of just, being unwell. But the symptoms are generally similar to chikungunya and dengue, which are other viral diseases transmitted by the same mosquito which was spoken about before, the Aedes aegypti mosquito. And what has been noticed is that in areas where Zika has been found to be circulating, that there has been an increase in what is called microcephaly, which is babies being born with this head circumference smaller than normal and having other abnormalities. So there are cases reported of persons suffering from meningitis and other neurological illnesses. And they've also seen an increase in what is called Guillain-Barré syndrome, or GBS for short, which deals with the immune system closing down or shutting down on persons and persons becoming paralyzed. Now, what has been reported also is that there have been a couple cases, 2 cases of possible transmission through sexual intercourse. Now, this is still under investigation because although the virus has been reported to be found in semen up to 10 days after infection, the main method of transmission is still through the Aedes aegypti mosquito, and so the control measures are geared towards such. Next slide, please. Thank you. Now, in terms of personal preventive measures, persons are encouraged to use repellents, and that was mentioned earlier also, repellents on their exposed parts of their body, cover their areas by wearing long sleeve shirts, trousers, that kind of thing, sleeping under mosquito nets, which are impregnated with insecticide, or they can be free of insecticide, but this creates a barrier between the mosquito and the person, especially if it's somebody who is infected. Using the different methods such as screening windows and doors, and I think someone is going to go further into some of these other measures in terms of removal of breeding sites, looking at water storage and so on. Pregnant women are a special group in this disease because of what is being seen in Brazil. So the prevention measures of infection in pregnant women is exactly the same as that for the general public. But because of the importance of these preventive measures, we have to emphasize, due to what we're seeing in the possible link, and I keep saying the possible link between Zika and some of these severe manifestations, because it's still not definitive. So healthcare professionals are then advised to promote measures which look at increasing knowledge of pregnant women, to give them the information so that they know to sleep under nets, to use mosquito repellents and so on, and also to check with their healthcare providers, especially in the event that they may have traveled to a country which is known to have Zika circulating. So the pregnant women are advised to take special precautions in the sense of observing if they come down with any symptoms of fever and headache and so on, and the rash, to make sure they keep in touch with their healthcare providers. Next slide, please. Okay, thank you. And I must note here that there's no vaccine or treatment for Zika, so it ultimately rests on personal prevention and reducing the mosquito population. In terms of CARPHA's ongoing role, CARPHA is currently monitoring the situation in the region and looking at the developments and providing updates to the Ministries of Health in our member countries and other key stakeholders. We are having coordinated meetings with national epidemiologists, the laboratory directors, chief medical officers. We continue to offer the test. We at CARPHA, we do laboratory tests to confirm Zika diagnosis using a specialized technique. We are also providing updates continuously on our website and other websites for travelers, health professionals, the public, the media. We have convened a regional media conference which was termed Zero In on Zika. We're strengthening our laboratory capacity for testing, and we're working with Ministries of Health and in collaboration with PAHO, WHO, and partners such as US CDC, the Caribbean Tourism Organization, and the Caribbean Hotel and Tourist Association. So I think in a nutshell, that is what I wanted to say about CARPHA, about Zika and our role, and I'm sure in the question and answer section, persons will have more, we will have further discussion. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Karen, for that information. That was wonderful. So the first presenter will be Ms. Adele Garbutt from Calabash Resort, and then she will be followed by Raul Prasad of Univar, and then Christopher Lubin of FDL Pest Control Solutions from St. Lucia. So we'll go ahead and start with Adele, who will give us some great tips. I'm sorry, I apologize. We're going to actually start with Raul, who's going to give us some information on the actual mosquito and how to identify it, and then we will go in to see some of our prevention guides for hotels. So Raul, I hand it over to you.
Thank you very much. A pleasant good morning, and in the case of the Eastern Caribbean, a pleasant good afternoon. I would like to start the show by talking a little bit about the integrated mosquito management, mitigation, and control best practices. And I quickly want to point out that this battle against Aedes aegypti is a battle where all are involved, and there are different techniques that have to be used in a combined integrated management approach in order to get success in the control of this vector. So we're going to start by going to the next slide to talk a little bit about the peculiar and unique behavior of Aedes aegypti. And this is the vector of dengue, chikungunya, and now Zika. There's a picture on the right-hand corner of the slide, but just to give some brief. Hello?
I just got back in. I got cut off, so I'm back in. Sorry.
Just to give some brief information on this particular vector, Aedes aegypti. One of the easier ways to recognize the species is that small, dark. It has a white lyre-shaped marking on the thorax, lyre of violin shape, and it has, of course, banded legs, white banded legs. But a particular feature of this species is that it's a container breeder, and it loves man-made containers, whether it be plant pots, abandoned tires, plastic pails, drums. It has a particular affinity for breeding in man-made containers. Another peculiar characteristic, it likes dark-colored containers. But they also would breed in natural locations, such as tree holes, axils of leaves of plants, particularly bromeliads. Another very important feature is the skip oviposition behavior. And this simply means that the female lays a few eggs in one location, then she flies off to another location, another breeding site, lays a few more eggs, flies to another location, lays a few more eggs. So she disperses her eggs over a number of potential of breeding sites. And this behavior is very important. And this particular behavior was used to develop a solution, which we'll talk about later on in the presentation. Other species of mosquitoes, like the culex, they tend to lay their eggs in a raft. If you can go back to the previous slide, please. Thank you. Yeah. They tend to lay their eggs in a raft, but this particular species deposits a few eggs over many sites. The egg to adult is in 7 to 8 days in typical Caribbean temperatures. Egg production sites are in close proximity to households. This mosquito is considered an urban dweller. And of course, they lay their eggs in close proximity to where they can get a blood meal. The eggs are highly resistant to desiccation, and they can remain viable for 6 months or more. And when they're inundated with water, the eggs can hatch. So think about it. Eggs are laid in many different sites. Some sites controlled personnel might not be able to access, like a block gutter in a roof, the axil of bromeliads, or in, a hole in a tree. So these eggs are very resistant to desiccation, and as soon as they're inundated with water, they can hatch and produce new adults. The eggs are produced based on the size of the blood meal that the female takes. So if she has a very good blood meal, she can lay as much as 200 eggs 200 eggs at one go. And in her average life cycle of about 21 days, a female mosquito can lay 5 batches of 200 eggs. So she can lay 1,000 eggs in her lifetime. The next slide, please. Okay, the lifespan of the adults are typically about 3 weeks. This particular species is often found breeding in septic tanks, storm drains, wells, water meter. Another key fact, this species can breed as little in as little as a teaspoon of water. They have a unique biting behavior. They are day biters. The species tend to be active just after sunrise, and they can bite until several hours before sunset, so they're a day biter. But in areas like stadiums in the night, which are brightly lit with floodlights, they can bite as well. But they're particularly a day biter. And they're a very sneaky biter. They approach humans from behind, and they tend to go for the ankles and the elbows. So that is a consideration when you're using repellents for protection. You need to ensure that you spray those areas. They would also bite dogs and other domestic animals, but they would mostly look for mammals to get their blood meal. Next slide, please. Okay, these are some pictures that you're seeing. If we go to the top right and then we go in a circle in a clockwise manner, that's a female Aedes aegypti feeding on a human. Please remember, only the females bite because they need the blood meal, the protein from the blood to develop their eggs. Picture at the bottom is a grossly engorged female, and the picture next to that, going clockwise, emerging adult mosquito, that is a mosquito emerging from the pupal case. Then you see the pupae in the water, and then you see another picture showing the eggs. An egg raft, which of course is a different species. The Aedes does not lay their eggs in rafts, they lay them in single groups. And of course, you see the larvae in the water. So these are all typical pictures of what you will observe out there in the field and in breeding grounds. Next slide, please. Fine. This one shows the life cycle of the Aedes aegypti mosquito. It undergoes what we call complete metamorphosis: egg, adult, larvae, and then pupal stage. And in our temperatures, this process can be completed in 8 days. So for a female mosquito lays eggs in the containers containing water, the eggs are ready to hatch a few days or several months after they are laid. The eggs hatch when they are submerged, of course, in water. Then you have the larval stage. The larvae are very aquatic. They develop in the pupae in as little as 5 days in tropical temperatures, of course. And then the pupae develop into an adult mosquito in 2 to 3 days, and the cycle continues.
Thank you very much, Danae, and everybody. Thanks for joining. My family own and run the Calabash Hotel in Grenada, and a couple of years ago we had a really bad mosquito problem, and we managed to get control of it, and what the things that we have done has really worked for us. So I'm really delighted that I have the opportunity to share what we've done with you, and hopefully you can do the same, and we can just get this whole Zika issue out of our way and carry on. So the CHTA have put together this lovely little graphic which sort of goes through some things that we should all be doing to control the breeding of mosquitoes. What I believe in is something called source control, which is essentially getting rid of breeding grounds. And once you get rid of the breeding grounds, the mosquitoes can't breed, and essentially they go elsewhere or they all die out on your property. So it's a really effective method that we've been using. So I'll just go through the points quickly, and then I'll just, on the next couple of slides, I'll go a little bit more into depth using examples of what we've done here at Calabash. So first of all, there's a complete and full inspection of potential breeding grounds for mosquitoes, which is essentially standing water. And then the next step is to remove all of the water, because that's the easiest thing to do. Repair any leaks around the hotel and secure water sources and containers. If you have any depression areas where soil, where water can stand after rain, it's a good idea to fill those in. And possibly the most important part is to create an integrated pest management plan so that you can keep up all of the good work that you've done to get rid of the breeding grounds. If you just click on the next slide. So first of all, eliminating breeding grounds. So that's where we should all start. Some of the commonly overlooked breeding places are tires. Old tires that come off of cars or lawn mowers, and unfortunately, but it does happen, they're sort of just discarded or left outside. Water collects in them perfectly, and they're a great place for mosquitoes to breed. Also tarps, I'm sure that the other hoteliers listening in must have some bits of machinery or tarps covering things outside, and they're great for catching rain. So that's another area to look at. And tanks. Around our property at Calabash, we have a lot of tanks that are buried into the ground and have got heavy concrete lids. So we thought that they were, completely secured. It turned out that they weren't, because mosquitoes can just get into the little cracks and then get into the water and breed, and then they all fly out again. So really keeping those properly sealed is really important. So as we were surveying our site for breeding grounds at the ground level, we never thought to look up into our gutters. And when we did that, we found a lot of areas that mosquitoes were breeding. In the Caribbean, we do have, the sun is very strong, and PVC guttering does sometimes melt a bit in the heat, and it warps a bit and causes depressions where water can collect. So it's very important to check your gutters, and also check in really odd places as well. We found that tiny spaces in between brickwork, that water was collecting there. The footbaths was another place where it wasn't perfectly joined. There was little areas where water was getting into, so it's really important to get a mason to come around with you and just fill in all those places. Added to that, there are plants around the property. While they do look great, bromeliads are key to a mosquito breeding ground. They're like a luxury hotel for mosquitoes. The leaves, they just have little gaps in between them where rainwater collects. So we've had to remove all of our bromeliads on property and just replace them with plants that are a little bit more, that don't collect any water, like bougainvillea, for example. They're perfect because they're brightly colored, and they were a good replacement. Can you change the slide, please? So once you've surveyed your property to find the breeding grounds, the next thing you've got to do is get rid of the breeding grounds. And the best way to do that is to get rid of the water permanently, because once you do that, you never have to think about it again. So all those tires, any containers that are left outside or can get wet, store them, get rid of them, just sort of generally tidy up the property to make to prevent breeding grounds for mosquitoes. Drains are also a key source for where mosquitoes do tend to breed. So areas that you can't always empty the water into drains. There'll always be some sort of water in drains. So either keep them clear or pour salt into it. So we found that salt was the best solution for us. Because we're near the sea, we didn't want to pour any chemicals down our drains, which would end up in the sea and then damage the marine life or affect any of our environment. So salt is a really eco-friendly way of dealing with it. If you just add salt to water, mosquitoes can't breed in salt, and also it kills the larvae. So it was the perfect solution for us. Or you can add fish to the water. So water features like copper pots. We've got lots of copper pots on the property, so we just make sure there's always guppies in there, so that we can have lilies and plants growing in the water features, but they're safe from mosquitoes. And then you provide food for the guppies, so everybody's happy, really. Let me change the slide, please. Thank you. So over onto good groundskeeping practices, which is important for all hotels. So I've mentioned that surveying your property is very important for finding breeding grounds. And then after you do that, you have to stay on top of it. So we've got a 27-acre property, and what we've done is we've split it into 7 zones, and we have a mosquito patroller who patrols the zone every day. It usually takes them about 4 hours, and we make sure that they do it first thing in the mornings because it's such an important part of what we do here. They do it first thing so that it doesn't get left to the last thing in the day. So they patrol the property, going to all known mosquito breeding grounds, and also any new ones that come up, and just deal with the breeding grounds. And if you do that once every day, you can keep on top of it. And that's the source reduction, and that's how we keep control of the breeding grounds. And then on to source reduction is just making sure the drains are clear and that water can run through, because a lot of our drains are underground. We can't really see what's going on under there. So if we can keep water moving through them, then mosquitoes can't breed there. Making sure that they're free of litter, leaf litter, especially the storm drains, and guttering. Exclusion, properly sealing manholes, water tanks, and other receptacles that hold water with cement wherever possible, so that it's totally sealed and there's no little cracks that the mosquitoes can get into. Cleaning of roofs and guttering. And actually what we've actually done at the hotel is we've removed as much guttering as we can. So at the front of the buildings over the doors we have guttering to push water aside when it's raining, but at the back of the building we've removed as much guttering as we can, so that we don't actually have to think about it anymore. It's just permanently getting rid of the problem. Also, crab holes and tree holes were a big problem for us. So we're a low-lying area. We have a lot of land crabs on the property. So we get rid of the crabs, and our mosquito patroller, when he's patrolling, he makes sure that the crab holes are filled, and then any tree holes that we know about, and we continue looking for more tree holes, we try and fill them in as best as we can. So, possibly pouring a little bit of sand into them or using wood to block them up, which doesn't really harm the tree at all, and is an eco-friendly thing to do, really. Pruning deciduous tree branches. So that is, that just really clears up all of your grounds. It makes the property look great, and then you can also easily see any water collecting anywhere. Whenever your gardeners are sort of weed eating, make sure that they tidy up the grass afterwards and just make the place look really good, because you don't want any of the grass cuttings to fall into the drains and then clog them up. And then removal of matter and unwanted items around the property, but also I always recommend going outside of the property as well. That way you can increase your zone of safety from the mosquitoes. So we have gone outside of our property, because any mosquitoes breeding outside of a property can fly in and create a problem for us. I believe there's evidence to show that the Aedes aegypti flies, or doesn't actually fly very far. It sort of goes about 150 meters away from a water source. So if you've got 150 meters around your property with no water sources, in theory you shouldn't have any mosquitoes. And on to the next slide.
Thank you so much, Adele. We appreciate all of that information. Our next presenter will be Chris, who will be talking to us about some fogging techniques. But Chris, just before you go on, all of my attendees, thank you so much for joining. I do like to remind you that this presentation is in fact being recorded. You will be able to access the videos as well as the PowerPoint presentation about 48 hours after this webinar is over. It will be posted to our website, CaribbeanHotelAndTourism.com. And we will also be emailing it to each of the attendees, so you will definitely have this resource as well as all of the guides that are listed within. And please be sure to make sure you type in your questions within the chat box, and we will get to them after all of the presentations. So we will be sure to make sure that we are recording your questions, and we will definitely make sure to answer them in the time that we have allotted. Any that we cannot get to, we will definitely answer after the webinar. So Chris will go ahead and lead us into some more prevention measures. So Chris, are you on the line with us?
Yes, I am, Adrian. Thank you very much. Yes. I would just like to just add a little bit to what Adele said. With regards to the grounds, the assessment, good thing is look at it from a surveillance perspective, and mapping is important. It's good to map the areas where you know there are potential breeding sites, that it can be checked continuously. And moving into the fogging, fogging is the form of space spraying where we can get the chemical in almost every single possible point. It is basically the mixture of the pesticide together with an oil, and it burns on the barrel, and as it burns, the chemical comes off, and you can get it into tight spaces. Drains, for example, where you might not have easy access to, you'll be able to fog it in addition to the open areas. Some people have issues in terms of the odor, but the important thing to understand is this form of treatment deals mainly with the adults, so it's something that has to be done more frequently. However, you can get a rapid knockdown of the population in a very short space of time. The time of day is very important because you do it as the day down to early evening when the wind currents are a lot lower. So it allows for the pesticide to sit in the air for a longer period of time and to get into as many small species as possible that you can have the effect that you want. Next slide, please. Misting. Misting is something that's not done much, but you have both trap-mounted misters and backpack misters. And basically, for those of us who use mist blowers, it is basically an improved format of this, where the nozzle, the ULV nozzle, ultra-low volume nozzle, really determines the quality of the mist. The droplet size is bigger than that of the fog, and it's not easy to control it as well as fog in itself. But again, the pesticide goes up into the air and rides on the wind currents. So places like in trees where you have the mosquitoes resting, you can get the chemical into these areas. The added benefit to it is the fact that the pesticide resting on the plants and on surfaces, there's a residual effect, and you can also end up killing mosquitoes that alight on that surface. That was one of the ways we know for sure you can have a longer level of control compared to fogging. One of the things we must keep in mind is after a mosquito has a blood meal, the form in which the blood is in its body, if it has to keep it that way, it would die. So it has to get rid of the fluid aspect, the liquid aspect of it, to make use of the protein for laying its eggs. So they must rest. And by doing that, that's one of the systems, one of the ways, apart from being in the air, you can take control of them. Next slide, please. Yes, the barrier treatments, basically I'm going to apply using a mist blower and get the chemicals onto plants, on walls, areas where the mosquitoes can rest. By doing this, the pesticide is in a more diluted form compared to the ULV, and I get immediate control. So areas close to breeding sites where mosquitoes would alight would be one of the areas we look at treating them in this method. The important thing to understand is these areas, especially in periods when there's not much rain, it can last a lot longer. So around buildings, walls, and plants, on the decks and other protected areas, lower parts of fences, dark and humid areas, outdoors, surfaces near breeding sites. This is where we can use barrier treatments. And it forms a very important aspect of the overall integrated mosquito management program. Next slide, please. I think this one was supposed to be done by Raul, but Raul, if you're on, you can go on, or I can go ahead and do it.
I can go on.
Okay.
I can go on. Thank you very much, Chris. Thank you very much for those useful insights. In terms of repellents, this is a lovely little recommendation here from CARPHA with regard to EPA registered repellents, which contains like the cardin, oil of lemon eucalyptus, neem, and DEET. What I can tell you, ladies and gentlemen, is that an independent evaluation of repellents done by the University of Florida clearly shows DEET as superior in performance in terms of hours of protection. The stronger the DEET concentration, for example, like DEET of about 24% concentration, you get as much as 5 hours protection. The product, now, for those people who don't like to use chemicals on their skin, I'm one of those. The product that is second in terms of performance is actually lemon eucalyptus, oil of lemon eucalyptus, and that one can give you protection between 2 to 4 hours. So DEET is one of the number one repellent in terms of extended protection. Intocare, the organization we probably just touched on a bit, has a product called Bug Shield, which is of oil of African eucalyptus oil that really works wonders. And of course, it's a natural product, non-chemical product. So those are options. Neem and those others, they do offer some degree of protection, but no really extended protection. My recommendation always, spray the exposed areas of the body, particularly the ankles. Aedes aegypti loves to attack the ankles or behind the elbows in particular. And of course, all other presenters, many of the presenters have alluded to loose long sleeves, long pants, limit spandex. Make sure you have closed-in shoes, no sandals or flip-flops. It's good to sometimes to spray the clothing with the DEET repellent. There are also some clothing available that is already impregnated with different repellents. And also you can use permethrin treated clothing. So, you know, repellents generally are a very good way of protecting yourself, and really for hoteliers out there, I would strongly recommend that hoteliers consider giving their guests, I know some of you are doing it already, but consider giving their guests repellents upon check-in, as well as, of course, their employees and the people that work for them. Thank you.
Okay, if I can build on this one. The environmental sanitation, Adele spoke a lot about it, and the key thing here is to remember that a mosquito is a more evolved insect, and its life cycle being complete metamorphosis. The immature stages are in a position or in an environment that is different from the adult. And a lot of our emphasis is on attacking the adult, and sometimes we forget that the immature stages, if we can break that cycle in the chain, we have much better control. So environmental sanitation has to look towards reducing the environment that the immature stages are in, and Adele spoke a lot to that. The other aspects of it we can look at is mechanical control, where we look at netting. Netting basically is a physical barrier, and you prevent the mosquitoes from getting to you. There are both impregnated nets and the natural net, but the most important thing is we're keeping in mind that the Aedes is a day feeder. Our guests sometimes getting bitten at night might not, most probably will not make the adjustment or the thinking that it might be killed. As far as we're concerned, it's mosquitoes biting us, so the netting will help reduce that aspect of it. Dressing with lighter colored clothes is also a very important thing. Dark colored clothes, mosquitoes are attracted to dark areas, so it's important to understand wearing of light colored clothes is also another mechanical approach to controlling. Use of repellents, someone mentioned that. You have the citronella candles and the linalool candles. Linalool it's found in soil, and basically this candles light and both citronella and linolin help repel the mosquitoes. Lanterns, coils, bug shields, all these, their role is basically repellency. So by being able to repel the mosquitoes, other systems within the integrated approach can assist. So repellents will be used as close as possible to humans, while the other systems can be incorporated outside of that range. Next slide, please. Okay, the other aspects of looking at control, outside of habitat modification with larviciding, where most of us look at larviciding, where we look at both chemical and biological larvicides, where you have BTI, Bacillus thuringiensis, and you have Temifos, which is one of the products I think has been banned. There is Altocid, which is a growth regulator. There are several other chemicals that can be used, both liquid and granular format. The monomolecular films basically help reduce the high bonding at the surface of water, and will impact the larval pupal stages and also the adults. These will help in areas such as crab holes or moisture. We sometimes have ponds where maybe because of the organic matter you can't always get to every single point, so they can also assist in that regard. Adele also mentioned outside of your property. Sometimes you might have to treat outside of your property for monomolecular film simply because you can't do as much as you want to, so that's one of the things you can look at. Growth regulators, I mentioned methylprin. There's also pyriproxyfen. There are several on the market which can help basically short-circuit the immature stages of the mosquito's life cycle and assist greatly in control. Chemical control, we know several of them. I mentioned a couple of them already, so I won't spend much time on this one. But look at the fogging, misting, barrier treatments as three of the key things that can be used to control the adult. Next slide, please. I think then it goes back to Raul.
Right, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to just give some brief highlights on the Intocare Trap. This is the latest innovation in mosquito control, and a lot of mosquito control specialists around the world in the Caribbean and Latin America are raving about this new device, because I think I alluded earlier to the fact that the Aedes aegypti demonstrates skip oviposition behavior, and they tend to lay their eggs in many places, many different breeding areas. So this trap maximizes on that behavior, where when the female mosquito visits the trap to lay a few eggs, she gets contaminated with a larvicide, and then she spreads the larvicide to every other breeding source that she visits, thereby killing her own offspring as well as the offspring of other mosquitoes. This trap, just to give a brief background, this trap was developed by Intocare in the Netherlands. This is a major Netherlands organization involved in mosquito control around the world, in Asia and Africa and the Caribbean in particular. The research and the development of the trap was funded by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, because Bill Gates has said, hey, a lot of these approaches to control Aedes have not been working. Let us look for a new, innovative method to control Aedes aegypti species. And as I said, funding was given from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and this is what you see as the end result. The trap, as I said, uses the skip oviposition behavior of the mosquito to facilitate the spread of the active to other breeding sites. CHTA will shortly share a 3D animation video as well as a fact sheet which clearly explains how the trap works. One of the key features is that the trap contains low-risk bioactives which would not affect non-target organisms. The trap is very robust, it's very user-friendly, and it does not require a power source. It has been successfully deployed in many Caribbean countries, and regionally it has been tested and evaluated by the Trinidad Vector Control Division of the Ministry of Health and by the Cayman Islands Mosquito Research and Control Unit. Since the Zika outbreak, we have been selling significant quantities of these traps, and I would actively urge you to have a look at the video, look at the fact sheet, and actively consider implementing them as part of your integrated mosquito management program for Aedes aegypti. Next slide, please. Now, I think it was Adele was earlier referring to green methods of controlling. And there's a product on the market called Appletini MS. It's a silicone-based product. It's not a pesticide. What it does, it forms a monomolecular film on the surface of the water when it's applied to pond or lake surfaces. And what happens is that the mosquito immature stages, the larvae and the pupae, are unable to get their breathing tubes through that monomolecular layer, and they suffocate and they drown. This product spreads very aggressively between vegetation that might be in a pond or a lake that you're trying to treat, in a larger water body. The product can only be used in contained water bodies. If there's overflow, you need to reapply this product. This product is very green. It allows gaseous exchange, so it does not have any effect on other aquatic organisms such as fish that might be in that pond. So this is a product. It's not a pesticide. It works purely by forming a physical barrier to restrict the immature stages from breathing, and they die. So this is another product. If you're looking for a green solution, it's something that you want to actively consider implementing in your program. Appletini has also developed a smaller product called the dengue drops, which is really Appletini MS in an encapsulated form. You can put like 2 of those like in a standing drum of water, and it protects for 28 days once there is no overflow. Once there's overflow, of course, you need to reapply. But this is something that's very green, very safe to use in sensitive areas or environmentally sensitive areas, and something that you want to consider. And a lot of this information has also been shared with CHTA, which you will have in due course. Thank you.
Okay, I just wanted to share with you some tips that we go through and that we do at Calabash. And we mentioned a little bit earlier that it's very important to keep drains clear and flowing. So possibly at least once a week, try and get your gardening teams to go into as many drains as possible and just clear out all of the debris in them to keep them flowing. So I think weekly is adequate. Chris and Raul both mentioned that the Aedes mosquitoes, when they lay their eggs in a basin, for example, a flower vase, when the water is poured out, the eggs can attach themselves to the sides of the basin, and they can stay there for up to 6 months or a year without any water. And then when water is added again, they hatch. So they're very robust in that sense. So to combat that, what we do with all of our flower vases and any basins that we have to keep water in, every 2 days we empty the water and scrub everything. So every time we change flowers, we scrub all of our vases, which gets rid of the eggs and also gets rid of watermarks, so it looks great. And then another thing that we do, I haven't mentioned it on the PowerPoint here, but with our bottles, our beer bottles, when we're finished with them and put them into crates to go back to the breweries, instead of putting them the right way up, we turn them upside down. That way, if it rains and they're stored outside on the property, or even when they're being transferred, water can't go into the bottles and create a breeding ground for the mosquitoes. And then the last point is just want to reiterate point of creating a zone of safety around your property. So that's checking that you've got no breeding grounds inside your property, as well as much as you can outside of the property. So in theory, your entire the hotel grounds should be safe from mosquitoes as much as possible. So the key points are really educate your staff on all these things that we've mentioned, so that they know the behaviors of the mosquitoes, know what they're looking for, find the water, empty the water, and just keep repeating that process. It should really be as simple as that.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Adele. You are going to move forward with letting us know a bit more about institutionalizing some of these procedures and some additional information that I know we've probably gone over. So go ahead.
I'll just go ahead with that one. So institutionalizing procedures and practices. Mosquito control needs to be a very important part of the practices of a hotel. It needs to. The only way that we've been managed to control it is by making it a feature of what we do here. Mosquito control, as I mentioned a little bit earlier, we have a 27-acre property. We've divided it up into 7 zones, and we patrol each zone one zone every day. We have a full checklist we're all of the known breeding grounds, and we have our guys walking around with a pail of salt and a spade to cover up any crab holes, and of course to dump salt into the drain. So they do that every single day at the beginning of the day, so it's not something that gets forgotten about, so it's at the forefront of their minds. So daily walks around the property, daily patrols around the property, supplemented with fortnightly weekend meetings, so that you can meet with the guys who are actually out there every day, address any problems, and fix breeding grounds, get rid of breeding grounds permanently wherever possible. So that's what we do.
Okay, thank you so much, Adele. This is just some additional information. I know we've gone over it already, but for time's sakes, we're going to move on to education and public relations. So our CEO of CHTA, Mr. Frank Comito, will handle this section, along with Mr. Johnson John Rose of CTO.
Thank you, Danae. Frank Comito here. I'll be covering the first section, which is really focusing on the environment in the workplace, employee awareness and training. It's really important that you get out general information about vector control in the workplace, and as an extension, encouraging them to practice these kinds of things as well at home and be aware of it in their home environment, community environments. All employees should be receiving basic orientation and updates via a variety of methods. It could be your intranet, flyers, meetings, briefings, and whatnot. Interdepartmental communications are absolutely essential. Building coordination amongst your maintenance and engineering departments, groundskeeping, HR, housekeeping, F&B, front office, sales and marketing. Just needs to be some very general coordination around all of that. And if you go to the next slide there, on that slide you will see basically just a preview of the kind of information that would be available in an employee type of tip sheet that you could provide. We have some of those listed on our resource center, and they're also listed on the other sites that you'll see there with CARPHA, as well as with the U.S. Centers for Disease Control. So there are a variety of resource guides that you can use to do orientation for employees, as well as for guests, and those are linked as well on our website, CARPHA, as well as CARPHA's website, which helped to develop these. There's a bullet in there about health and safety guidelines for suspected cases, and really appreciative. We've been getting input from, in particular, from Christine at Galley Bay and Antigua, who's put in some protocols there as well about getting it right first with employee awareness and training, and we'll share those tips with you on the website shortly. But specifically, what happens if a case is recorded, and how does your staff handle that? You need to have protocols and procedures in place for that. There should be a documented system of reporting. Hotels are encouraged to have an illness reporting procedure so that any suspected cases may be documented. And that's not only for internal purposes, but it also needs to be communicated to the public health authorities locally as well. Other information should be asked of the guest in that case, the countries that they visited prior to location, if guests are pregnant or potentially pregnant, there needs to be some added precautions and information provided to them through the public health authorities, preferably. So that's I mean that's an overview of some of the internal communications that need to occur. It's really important because that internal communications, particularly with employees, also has the opportunity to extend beyond the local area. And we'll talk about some of that in coordination later. At this point, I think Johnson is ready. Johnson John Rose at the Caribbean Tourism Organization will speak more about public awareness about Zika preventive measures. Johnson?
Yes, Frank. Thank you very much. My strengths and expertise would be in crisis communication here, and it is how do you reach out from the crisis that Zika has caused and for us. You will notice there's a bullet point that says CTO CHTA FAQs. the purpose of that is to reach out to the general public, the media, the proposed traveler, to ensure that they understand what's going on, they know what's going on from your perspective. And so we've put out a series of FAQs. What are some of the things that people will want to know about the situation? Will they be safe? Will they be okay when they come to the Caribbean, when they come to stay at your property? So please take a look at the FAQs and I'm sure the CHTA has done that as well, circulated to all of the hotels and the hotel associations, so share with the members so you can get a sense of what to do. Use it as a template and then you can adapt it to your local situation to make sure it works. We mentioned employee communication because that's critical too as part of the communication with the outside world. When there is a crisis like this one of the first things that I do is send out an email to all staff. Let them know that it's happening, and it's all right to share all of the information on Zika in this case, but also to emphasize to them that they shouldn't talk to the public, to the media. They get a call from someone from the media, you should know who has to talk about it, because the risk that we face, and I see it a lot with Zika, everyone's talking and everyone's putting out conflicting and confusing information. So it's important that your staff be advised as part of your public as well. In terms of media and communications tools, well, we mentioned the FAQ, but there are all the other areas, the press releases are fine, and there's one other area that Carolyn mentions quite a lot, and we discussed even with our national tourist offices in New York. It's the use of celebrities and other people in your country who are there, who are enjoying the holiday at your hotel, at your property, who are enjoying themselves. Just ask them, those of them you're familiar with, photograph on Instagram, on Facebook, on Twitter, get the messages out there. These are some of the areas that you can reach out. And one more thing, CTO does a crisis communications workshop, a pretty good one. I think, Frank, you, the CHTA, and the hotels and members should take advantage of that. It's not a terribly costly thing, but it's worth the investment.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Johnson, for that amazing information. Next up, we will hear from our president, Ms. Carolyn Jabez. Carolyn, are you on with us?
Hi, I'm here. Hi, everyone.
Excellent.
Super. Well, let me begin by thanking the presenters so far. It's been really fantastic. I have learned a lot, even though I've done a lot of reading myself already, but it's been very educational and informative. Coming from a hotel background myself, I can tell you that the lesson to be learned is that we are in this together. We definitely have to work closely with our public sector on our islands, on in our destinations, and whatever you do on your own resort property has to then be carried into the communities. As you already heard, the work with our own resort teams is very important. We have done this already at our own properties and have had fantastic success. Our staff is extremely enthusiastic in carrying the message forward, becoming our ambassadors in the war against mosquitoes. What is also important to note is that I believe that we have to be aware that this is going to require a medium to long-term strategy. I do not believe that efforts, should just be lasting for the next 3 months. We have to see this as a 1 to 3 year situation where we just have to do our best to prevent mosquitoes from breeding. In terms of our communities, so we started with our own resort teams, but in the meantime, we have also suggested that we create district committees, just as you would perhaps as Adele showed you and explained how you subdivide your own property. This now needs to happen on a community level where you have a public sector person like the public health inspector from your area work closely together with the private sector, and you create a plan of action where you involve your health centers, your church leaders, principals of schools, for example, your mayor if your area has a mayor, or other foundations that are in charge. Generally, I always find that the private sector tends to move a little quicker than the public sector because the public sector needs a little bit of time to regroup and organize. So from my perspective, I have already reached out to school principals and some of the leaders in our community and offered assistance whilst we're still trying to perhaps wait for that district committee to take effect. The cleanup campaigns are critical. Again, I seem to always think that like everybody knows what needs to happen, but you know, when you do your seminars, you understand how everybody is in fact grateful when you point out certain items that, certain areas that one may have forgotten. So everybody is in fact very happy to learn more about how and what needs to be cleaned up. And so I think that requires, as I said, some strategy how you share that information. Frank, I'm sure you want to talk a little bit about our National Hotel and Tourism Associations, how we reach out to them. Do you want to take over from there, Frank?
Yeah, just briefly, I think you've covered most of the bases, and I think we want to get to the Q&A in a second, but it's really important to that whole issue of collaboration and coordination is absolutely essential. And through the National Hotel and Tourism Associations, the tourist boards and Ministries of Tourism, there's the ability to be conveners at the local level, much as CARPHA and CTO and CHTA have convened at the regional level, and we're also extending that beyond our scope into CARICOM and PAHO and other areas. The opportunity presents, and it is essential at the local level. And the National Hotel and Tourism Associations for individual hotels should be vehicles that you work with locally to advance policies, advance practices, advance the lines of communications that are absolutely essential for mitigation, public awareness, and mitigation and control, public awareness and education, and effectively minimizing the impact of this situation. Those are the only added points I would make.
Okay, wonderful. So thank you so much to all of our presenters. We're going to get into our Q&A, and we're going to start out with a couple of questions for Karen. Karen, are you still on the line? Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Yes, I'm here. Sorry.
Perfect. We've been getting a lot of questions about Zika, specifically as it relates to pregnant women, and what they can use. Is DEET safe? Is, you know, when you have this situation, what are the periods for risk for pregnant women? First 3 months, what are the symptoms? Could you speak just a bit more to that specific situation so that we can answer some of those questions that we have out there?
Definitely. The Pan American Health Organization actually looked at some guidelines and produced some guidelines specifically for pregnant women because of what is being observed. Sorry. And what they're stressing, and the same thing we are, is that because the primary means of transmission is through the mosquito, then control measures, especially for pregnant women, have to do with personal protection and taking those personal precautions. So insect repellents can be used. The physical barriers that you have in terms of screening doors, windows, and so on, wearing long sleeve clothes, long pants, and that kind of thing, those are the main measures that pregnant women can take.
Okay.
In terms of the symptoms, if a pregnant woman becomes infected with Zika, the symptoms you're going to see are typically the same symptoms that you would see in someone who is not pregnant. So the interest here is that because of the potential link that they're seeing in Brazil with the babies, that is why the pregnant women are being looked at as a special interest group. But again, this woman should also keep in close contact with her healthcare provider. It is said that in the first, from what they're seeing, maybe in the first trimester would possibly be the more serious part when the baby is now developing and so on, if it is that Zika is causing some of these problems. But I just wanted persons to note that it's not every pregnant woman who contracts Zika has a baby who suffers from microcephaly. Okay, and it's not every baby who has microcephaly, it's because the mother had Zika.
Okay, so you're basically saying that it's not yet specifically proven in all those cases. So
Yes.
any scientific evidence to support this is still ongoing.
Yes, exactly. Investigations are still ongoing.
And then, so for the DEET repellent, pregnant women are okay to wear this DEET repellent?
Yes, yes, they are. They are. Just make sure if there's some uncertainty on the woman's part that she's always speak with her healthcare provider.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you so much, Karen. We do have another question specifically in relation to fogging and misting. So Chris and Raul, I'm sure you guys are on the line. Some of the main questions that we have about fogging are obviously what's the effects on, say, animals and human health, as well as whether or not it will damage the population, or can the mosquitoes become immune to this particular chemical reaction of fogging, and what are some of the things that you like to suggest to folks in that instance?
Okay. Well, I can start off by indicating that
go ahead, Chris.
It's definitely resistance to both to the pyrethroids and in some cases malathion is known. And that's why we're stressing the importance of an integrated pest management program or mosquito management program, not just fogging. I think the key thing right now, since Zika is in the air, we are all quote-unquote freaking out. So space spraying is going to be the first thing that we do. But parallel to that, we need to look at the other systems which will deal with the breeding sites and also the adults. If the fogging system, the way it's done, you basically have the pesticide in an oil which is being burnt on a hot barrel. So the amount of pesticide that actually comes out to impact humans and animals is very low. You need a very small amount of the pesticide in terms of concentration to kill the mosquito. However, if we have to be exposed to it continuously, there can be an impact. These studies have been done. It's known that they can impact human beings in a negative way based on the level of exposure. But if it's been applied in the open environment, the amount of exposure to humans and animals would definitely be a lot less. Misting is same space spraying, barrier treatments to surfaces where if it is done, the pesticide is dry, level of exposure to human beings are a lot less. So I think it has to be put in context of how it's done, how people are exposed to it. Because if we're going to be fogging an area and someone wants their home to be fogged, they can simply come outside and let the chemical do the work, and when it dissipates, they can go back in. So it's how they need to understand that the exposure is what will impact them if they stay in the environment for a very long time. But that again would take a fair amount of time. Raul?
Yes, I just want to add that a lot of these products, first of all, should be applied by professional people who know what they're doing. That's one. And the second thing is that they must follow label rates in order to ensure the right amount of insecticide, which takes care of the mosquitoes, are released into the environment. So two things: skilled professionals who know what they're doing to do these applications, and the second thing is ensuring all label rates are followed.
Right. And you mentioned earlier in the presentation a specific eco-friendly chemical or pesticide that's best to use to fumigate. Can you just remind us of that?
Well, this is not in the case. The one that I mentioned is not for fogging operations, but really to help to break the breeding cycle of the mosquito. And that product I was talking about is Appletini, silicone-based product. When you throw it into the water surface of contained water bodies, it forms a film across the surface of the water, and the immature stages they drown. So that is one green method. But there are many other botanical-based formulations that are available out there that can be considered less or low toxic, that are also like pyrethrin-based formulations that are also used in mosquito adulticiding programs.
Okay, perfect. Now I want to get into a bit. We have a few questions in regards to breeding sites. Our pools breeding sites for mosquitoes. There are many rivers and backwaters close to populated areas. What are some of the things that can be done in those cases? And are rivers and backwaters dangerous areas for mosquitoes to be found? And how far is how far is secure from a breeding ground?
That's a good one. Adele mentioned the 150-foot radius. I think we have to look at the resorts and also look outside of the resorts in terms of that radius. But there are pesticides or chemicals that can be used in the water. To BTI Bacillus thuringiensis being one of the main products that can be used in water that will impact the larval stages and pupal stages and not have a negative impact on the environment. Raul, have anything you want to add there?
Yes, I would just like to add in a free-flowing river, there's limited chance of mosquito breeding success. But the key thing is that we have to realize that the vector for Zika and chikungunya is the Aedes aegypti mosquito. But there are other nuisance species like the Culex species, which lay their eggs in rafts and they tend to breed in larger bodies of water. So although you might be, when you tip and dump containers and you reduce breeding sites on property, you're taking care of one species. But you may have an adjacent lagoon or a lake or a pond where the Culex species, another species, is breeding. So you need to take care of those sites as well, because they can invade and of course take blood meals and they bite your guests and you have disgruntled guests or employees. So you need to, it's based on the species, but you need to take care of those alternate sites as well. Now, another very important thing I need to mention is that the hotel might be doing the very best. And I think other presenters mentioned it. But then you might have a nearby community who's doing zero in terms of mosquito control. You have consistent invasion. So you need to really co-opt those people and try to get them all involved in mosquito control.
Excellent. And Chris, while you're still on, we do have a question specific about the Natrapal insect repellent. Do you have any experience with that, and is that effective for pregnant women?
Well, I do have a case where a pregnant woman is not too comfortable wanting to use it, but with the work and information we've gotten from Intocare, I have tested it. It works. It definitely works pretty well. And the training sessions we did, Raul, myself, they have indicated that it lasts a lot longer. But the active ingredient being eucalyptus, several studies have been done to look at the impact on human beings. So it is considered a safer product than some of what's on the market. In terms of pregnant women, maybe I won't be able to give you all the answers on this one, but I would definitely say with the work we've done, it works pretty well.
Okay. And Adele, in regards to more environmentally friendly pesticides and practices, as well as time and resource management from a hotelier perspective, what insight can you give us on that, just from environmentally friendly pesticides to also resource management? You talked about, implementing these guides into our hotels. We all know that we're all resource strapped sometimes. How do you manage that with a boutique hotel?
Yeah, we've got a small property with only 30 rooms and about 90 or so staff. So resources are often stretched, time is stretched. So the way we do that is just keep it very simple. We have one person dedicated to, two people dedicated and one dedicated to the patrols. And we found that using salt, just simple table salt, which is so very cheap, is the best method for us. So it's not very taxing at all. And then just permanent solutions like adding fish. We never have to think about those areas again. Clearing drains, so we don't have to think about drain clogs often, and removing gutters as well. So that's, just by keeping it simple, I think it's the best answer.
If I can add something, one of the things we have to keep in mind is education and stressing to staff that it impacts them also at their homes. So if the necessary education is done within the resorts, like we as a pest control company, we offer training to our customers that, and we ask them to take it. So if you can encourage staff to understand why you're doing what you're doing, because most times we don't take pests seriously until it becomes an issue. And if we understand the surveillance that's needed, there was a lot of what Adele spoke to, and it's done properly, and people become a part of it, it becomes second nature. So, and we get much better results that way.
Yeah, I agree with Chris. The education is very important, and changing the attitude towards mosquitoes is very, very important to our success.
Yes.
Excellent. Thank you so much for that insight. Karen, are you still with us? I think Karen has had to drop off. So all of you who have specific questions related
sorry,
to...
I'm here.
Oh,
sorry.
hi, Karen.
Sorry.
I know you had to run. We are getting a lot more questions specific to, are there any specific types of groups or populations that are more susceptible to the illness that you know of? And besides pregnant women, of course. And no.
Not in terms of viruses in general, we usually would look more so at pregnant women, babies, or children under 5, and the elderly, and persons who have chronic conditions or are immunocompromised. So that's the general.
And how long generally do the symptoms last after you've contracted?
About 7 days.
About 7 days.
It's usually, yes, usually about
Karen,
7 days.
Karen, this is Frank. How long is the virus active in someone? If we saw the case in Texas of someone, sexually transmitted, is that something that's active in your system for 3 months, 6 months, forever? Can it be contagious that way?
Frank, that's a very good question, and there's still a lot that is unknown about Zika. From what we know, the virus levels seem to drop very quickly, and that's something we're seeing when we get samples for testing, lab samples, blood samples in the lab for testing, which is why we ask for persons, if samples are coming in, that they be collected within a time frame. And it has been shown to stay in urine and serum for up to like 10 days, but beyond that, we don't know.
Okay. And then is the test, is there a test to diagnose Zika commonly available in the U.S.? Do you know by any chance?
No, it's not. There are no commercial tests available for Zika. It would have to be tested in a laboratory, and usually public health laboratory. Like in the U.S., there's CDC. CARPHA does it here for our Caribbean territories, and there are some other labs like at Institute Pasteur, because it's a specialized test called PCR for short. It's a molecular test, and because of the type of virus, the tests that are available for confirmation at the moment are being evaluated or validated, because in our populations we have had persons exposed to dengue and chikungunya, and there are similarities between those viruses and Zika. There's a possibility of what we call cross-reactivity in some other tests. So the molecular one is the one that's the definitive test that is used, but only some labs offer it. It's not commercially available.
Okay, great, understood. So there is a question about the Aquitaine, Raul. Is it safe to use it in cisterns where for drinking water?
Absolutely. It is actually labeled for the treatment of drinking water. Not a high volume required. It's 1 milliliter, 1/5 of a teaspoon per square meter of water surface. So, for example, like you have a cistern 2 or 3 square meters, it's 3 ml alone into that cistern. And Aquitaine degrades into naturally occurring silicates. We use silicone in a lot of products on a daily basis: shampoos, soaps, lipstick. So this is a very, very safe product, and it is labeled for treatment of drinking water.
Perfect. Thank you so much. In terms of guppies in the water, Adele, how do you deal with this? If they apply guppies to the water, how do you deal with their excretions?
Well, we actually use them in copper pots. So I think the answer is we don't deal with it because it's just it's like a pond. Really, so we've got a large slow-moving drain just outside the front of our property, which we do know mosquitoes do breed in, and we put the guppies in there, and they live quite happily as they would in the sort of natural environment. So yeah, That's how we deal with them.
It's biodegradable, Adele.
It's biodegradable. That's the right answer. That's the
Adele, since you love to use salt, what's the recommended ratio, and does it affect grass or plants when you use salt in those areas? And please let us know what type of salt. I believe it's regular table salt, but enlighten us just a bit.
It's regular table salt, and we have a sort of a cup measure, and we sort of just put as much as possible into the puddles, really. We actually, you know what? I'm going to hold my hands up and say we don't actually have a measure that we use, an actual measure. We just sort of do as much as feels right, really, and it doesn't seem to have an impact on our grass at all. It doesn't seem to have an impact anywhere else. After somebody who's much more technical than me that might be able to answer that, but it from what we have seen and the biologist who has come to the property has seen, it doesn't seem to have an effect on anything. It seems all right.
What I would say from an agronomy point of view is that if when you put the salt, it will kill the larvae, but the salt, the sodium, that anion basically over time gets washed off, gets leached soil anyway. So because it's localized applications, it's not over the entire lawn. So as a result of rain over time, it will leach that sodium out of it. So it should not have a major impact. We have to put a lot of salt to see an impact, I think.
Okay.
Karen, are you still with us?
Yes, I am.
Perfect, because I do have a question. So what should we do if we suspect employees are suffering from the disease and we do not want the individual to spread the disease? What would you suggest in terms of the protocol for people to do that?
For persons, okay, the interesting thing about Zika is that not everyone who contracts Zika will show symptoms. And so between 70 to 80% of persons will show symptoms once they get Zika. What the person would need to do is to isolate themselves in a sense from, they're the ones who actually need to be under a mosquito net, especially if they're sleeping during the days, for that barrier so that mosquitoes don't get to them to pick the virus up to transmit to someone else. And they would take, they could take, as there's no treatment or vaccine, they could take paracetamol or acetaminophen because they're not sure that it is Zika that they have. Because you don't want to use ibuprofen or aspirin if you have not ruled out dengue, because if it is dengue that the person has and they take aspirin or ibuprofen, it could cause them to hemorrhage. So barring confirmation, and because the symptoms of dengue, chikungunya, and Zika are similar, the person would just have to take those measures in terms of trying to avoid being bitten by mosquitoes. So they also should be using repellents, sleeping on the nets, and trying to stay in areas where they would not get mosquito bites.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Karen. Thank you all so much. We have still a lot of questions pouring in. Don't worry if we are not able to answer them on this particular webinar. We will, in fact, we are recording every last one of your questions, and we will, in fact, get back to you via email. I would like to thank all of our presenters for being here. We thank you so much for sharing your valuable information. And I would like to remind all of our attendees that this presentation, again, is being recorded. All of the resources that you see within this presentation, from resource guides to information to products to services, I encourage you, they will be available on CARPHA's website as well as CHTA's Zika Resource Center. We got a lot of questions about downloading some of the information, some graphics. Please go to our resource site if you want to understand some of the traps, flogging, misting. Always contact your professional. Go to CHTA's website. Look at our resource center. We will put you in contact with the right people that you need to get a hold of a lot of these prevention measures and some of these solutions. So we would like to thank all of you again for attending. This is amazing. We hope that you guys will stay safe, and we will again email this to all of the attendees, and it will be up within about 48 hours. So please give us some time for that.
Also, if I may add, this is Frank Camilo speaking. We will be doing a webinar, another webinar very shortly, within a week or two. It will be very technical oriented and much more for your engineering, maintenance kinds of thinking. And stay tuned. We'll get information on that shortly.